Discover the incredible power of time and patience. Transform your life with 5 surprising lessons. There was a time when Sarah believed she could turn her dreams into swirling gusts of color on a canvas. Now, she poured coffee into chipped mugs at the local diner, feeling like a ghost of who she once was. Each day blurred into the next a fog of grease-smudged uniforms, tired smiles, and the relentless demands of motherhood. In the haze of routine, time felt like sand slipping through her fingers, the relentless ticking of the clock drumming out her hopes. Today, as autumn leaves danced outside, Sarah watched her 8-year-old daughter, Lily, paint with a fervor that ignited something within her, a long-forgotten hunger for creativity. The vibrant strokes of the brush seemed to breathe life into a silence that choked her. "This is incredible, Lily," she exclaimed, but in her heart, doubt took root. Who was she, a waitress consumed by bills and responsibilities, to dream of supporting her child's artistic ambitions? The whispers from their small town echoed in her mind, steeped in skepticism. What can a waitress offer? Turned into chains wrapped around her hopes. As Sarah filled another glass, her emotions swirled. Desperation battled with a flicker of determination. What if she pursued something greater, something for Lily? Yet the pressures of her circumstances pressed down like a weight on her chest. Should she dare to challenge those societal expectations? What if she faltered? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. Just as uncertainty wrapped her like a shroud, calamity struck. The diner shut down without warning. Jobless and burdened by her own dreams stifled for years, Sarah grappled with her own identity. Panic clawed at her insides. Was she meant to pour coffee for the rest of her life? As the weight of despair crashed over her shoulders, she remembered her father's lessons on patience and perseverance. Could she truly reignite that spark, confront her fears, the risk of failure looming like dark clouds overhead? The thought of picking up the paintbrush again pushed adrenaline through her veins. But could she face the vulnerabilities that came with it? Anguish mixed with hope as she walked into the local art shop, her heart pounding with both fear and excitement. There she met Mr. Thompson, whose empty canvases seemed to await her touch. She saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes, an acknowledgement of potential yet buried. But that very recognition terrified her. As she cautiously dipped her brush into paint, the exhilaration of possibility mixed with the agony of doubt. Would her desire for artistic fulfillment overshadow the bond she cherished with Lily? Would they drift apart like those forgotten colors on her palette? She stood before the canvas, anxiety thick in the air. Each stroke could stoke a fire or extinguish it, leaving her with a heart full of questions, emotions raging within her like a storm. With the opening night of her work approaching, Sarah was caught in a tempest of anticipation and dread. As she grappled with whether to fulfill her ambition or prioritize motherhood, the truth struck her with cruel clarity. Every choice would define her. As the heaviness of her thoughts wrapped around her like a vice, she stood at a precipice, unsure which path would lead her home. With the opening night looming closer, Sarah found it increasingly difficult to distinguish between flight and fight. Each day blurred into a cycle of distraction, yet the colors dancing before her eyes challenged her to break free. The smell of linseed oil lingered in her clothes, a reminder of the evening she first dared to touch that brush. Even now, the memory twisted inside her, an intoxicating blend of joy and doubt. Would she dare to continue? Lily's laughter echoed in her thoughts, grounding her amidst the chaos. The girl was oblivious to her mother's inner turmoil, blissfully lost in her own craft at the kitchen table. Watching her daughter pour creativity onto paper reminded Sarah of herself. How long had it been since she approached life with such unguarded fervor? Her desire to nurture Lily's artistic dreams collided with the urge to reclaim her own identity. Yet every heartbeat whispered the same threat: failure. A chance encounter brought her face to face with Mrs. Jenkins, one of their regular patrons from the diner, as Sarah dashed through the grocery store. "You've been so quiet since the diner closed. What's next for you?" Mrs. Jenkins inquired, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "I'm working on a project." Sarah stumbled over her words, anxiety knotting her stomach. The prospect of sharing her desires exposed her vulnerability, yet a flicker of hope ignited beneath her skin. "Project? You? That sounds intriguing. You should pursue it." Mrs. Jenkins' encouragement shot through her like a burst of sunlight, blinding yet invigorating. With each sincere word, Sarah felt the chains of doubt clink and crack. It was the moment that ignited her resolve. In the days following that encounter, Sarah sat before her canvas with renewed determination. Every stroke of paint became a pulse of her defiance against the whispers of her past. The once frightening blank space transformed into an exploration of her unshackled self. She painted not only because she wanted to, but because she had a family legacy to uphold her father's belief that self-expression birthed strength. Yet as the days drifted closer to the exhibition, those dreams danced evasively at the edges of her consciousness, darting out of reach whenever she focused too intently. She studied the world outside, where the leaves' vibrant colors turned beneath autumn's whim, and even there, a profound truth echoed in her heart. Growth required change, and change often demanded courage. On the morning of the exhibition, a new anxiety gripped her, more potent than fear of failure. It was the realization that this event was not merely her escape but a presentation of her deepest self. What if her art failed to resonate? Would her journey unravel, leaving behind only disappointment? A small voice inside urged her to break the silence. She needed to share not just her canvas but the entirety of her experience, the doubts, the fears, the longing for connection through creation. She prepared a speech, each word weighted with significance as she rehearsed, heart pounding like a war drum. Now, as she stepped into the gallery, the air thick with anticipation, Sarah paused. Her hands trembled at her sides. This was at the intersection where her fear of judgment would meet her yearning for acceptance. Would she be brave enough to embrace the vulnerability inherent to creation and express it boldly? The moment of truth stood before her, and with a deep breath, she crossed the threshold. What awaited her on the other side, she could only imagine, as the gallery awaited her reveal. Would the colors of her soul resonate within the hearts of those present, or lay dormant, lost among untouched canvases? She would find out soon enough. As Sarah stepped into the gallery, the air crackled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She could feel the countless eyes, some familiar, others strangers, piercing through her, expecting a revelation, an awakening of sorts. Something stirred in her chest, a beat resonating with every thrilling possibility and every suffocating doubt. Her gaze flitted around the room, taking in the subtle elegance of the space, the shiny wooden floors reflecting the vibrancy of her canvases. They hung on the walls like unspoken secrets, each whispering stories of struggle, bravery, and rebirth. But amid the fluorescent lights, a shadow of fear loomed large. What if no one understood? What if the stories of her soul remained unheard, lost amidst the chatter and clinking glasses? Determined to reclaim her voice, her feet carried her to the small podium set in front of her artwork. Each step was a weighted test, a battle against familiar insecurities. She had prepared for this moment. She would share everything, the doubts that gnawed at her, the exhilaration of creation, the bond with Lily that inspired her work. But standing there, caught between anticipation and anxiety, the words lodged in her throat. What had she to lose? It wasn't merely her paintings that hung in the balance. It was her entire journey of rediscovery. She steadied her breath, summoning the courage that fueled her brushstrokes, hoping that maybe, just maybe, some part of her story would connect with her audience. "Thank you all for coming." Her voice trembled but remained resolute. She could feel the silence envelop her, not as a weight, but as a shield pushing her through the cracks of fear. "When I paint, I don't just mix colors on a canvas. I mix memories and feelings, desires and fears. Art is not just the final product, it's the process, the exploration of uncertainty. Sarah glanced at Lily, who beamed proudly among the crowd. The warmth of her daughter's support pulsed through her. She shared snippets of her journey, tales of swollen hands and sleepless nights, moments spent questioning her purpose, haunted by the shadow of her past failures. Gradually, she felt the words flowing more freely like paint across the canvas. The audience leaned in closer, captivated by her vulnerability. This wasn't a mere exhibition. It was an invitation to witness a piece of her soul. As she spoke, connecting her art to her life, an awakening unfurled inside her, a realization that the act of sharing was itself a form of creation. But as the applause erupted, an unsettling thought flickered within her mind. Would this support last, or was it fleeting? And more importantly, how would she navigate the inevitable critics? The same doubts that once held her hostage now haunted her with whispers of imposter syndrome. Later that night, as the room filed out, Sarah lingered, her heart racing despite the warmth of the evening. She scanned the empty walls where her artwork had thrived moments ago, absorbing the bittersweet mixture of acceptance and vulnerability. She had dared to step into the light to express herself. But at what cost? What she had learned about herself sat heavy on her shoulders. Vulnerability could either foster connection or lay bare her insecurities to the merciless tides of judgment. In the days that followed, her journey unfolded like a dual-edged sword of triumph and turmoil. Positive feedback flowed from unexpected places, yet so did critique. Each comment etched itself into her mind. They teased a painful question. Could she endure this emotional exposure? Confidently sculpting her path depended on facing her fears, and the cycle of doubt persisted, sharper than painted brushes. As she returned to her canvas, the urge to paint became a reckoning. Would her next creation be a response to the encouragement or an answer to the criticism? Each stroke might unveil hidden layers of anger or vulnerability, an exploration of her psyche that screamed for clarity but recoiled from confrontation. She found clarity within the chaos, only to be met with the uncertainty of the next step where paths diverged and the turning point awaited. Perhaps this revelation pushed her forward. Perhaps it was time to confront her perceived failures, embrace the risk of being seen, and just maybe embolden herself to create something wholly new. The rigid structure of her past crumbled under the weight of her resolution. The canvas loomed ahead, beckoning her to wield her brush with intention. But a deeper question emerged. Would she maintain her newfound bravery when faced not only with rejection but the unsettling truth of her own limitations? As she set to work, the answer remained elusive, hanging like wet paint on a canvas, waiting for her to coax it into form. In the weeks following her exhibition, Sarah immersed herself in her art, allowing the feedback, both praise and critique, to swirl through her consciousness like vibrant paint mixing on a palette. Each brushstroke was a confrontation, and each creation felt like a dialogue with her insecurities. The thrill of expression battled against the weight of expectation. She found herself painting late into the night, often losing track of time in her fervent quest for clarity. Yet complexity brewed within her. The initial high of sharing her work began to fade, replaced by an insistent pulse of doubt. One morning, staring at a canvas that remained eerily blank, she questioned her ability to continue. Was she merely an artist pretending to understand her own narrative? This feeling clawed at her, igniting memories of self-doubt that had once nearly crippled her. With the fear gnawing at her resolve, she decided it was time to channel those feelings into her work. It was no longer enough to paint beauty. She needed to encapsulate struggle, the very chaos that often clouded her thoughts. As she layered colors with restless strokes, she began to see more than just random swaths of paint. She saw the potential for evolution, the possibility of transformative growth. It occurred to her that creation itself mirrored life's complexities, a continuous process of trial, error, and eventual resolution. Driven by these realizations, Sarah envisioned a new series that would weave together her internal battles and triumphs. But with that vision came the daunting task of channeling raw emotions into tangible art. Each canvas became a battle against herself, pitting her creative aspirations against lingering fears. She made a conscious decision to confront the critics head-on by hosting a small workshop aimed at sharing her journey in a more intimate setting. It was a leap into vulnerability, an act that both terrified and invigorated her. However, self-doubt lingered, whispering that she wasn't equipped to guide anyone, let alone discuss her own complexities. Could she fulfill this role? Would the feedback shape her further, or tear her down once more? As the date of the workshop approached, doubt morphed into dread. On one particularly restless night, seated at her cluttered dining table, she scribbled feverishly in her journal, desperately seeking a path to clarity. What if they don't connect with my truth? The ink spilled onto the pages. As the candle flickered, illuminating her thoughts through the dusk, she recognized a turning point. Guiding others would mean stepping beyond her internal turmoil and embracing the messiness of creation, her own imperfections reflective of the participants' journeys. This revelation shifted something within her, forcing her to confront why she had painted in the first place. Art was not simply about beauty. It was about communication and connection. On the day of the workshop, Sarah felt a tug of anxious anticipation. She arranged the chairs in a circle, creating an inviting atmosphere for sharing and collaboration. The moment they entered the room, a weight lifted. Each participant carried their unique stories, their own burdens, and she realized they were united by the act of creating, not by perfection or accolades. As she spoke to them about her journey, her fears slipped away, giving way to an exhilarating sense of purpose. The workshop transformed into a therapeutic exchange, filled with laughter and emotional breakthroughs. By vulnerable sharing, she discovered the transformative power of connection. Her own fears laid bare were met with empathetic understanding. But as the participants began to unveil their own struggles, a flicker of apprehension returned. Could she truly guide them in confronting their personal battles? What if, in leading others, she became ensnared by her self-doubt once more? Uncertainty surged through her as she stood among them, realizing the weight of this newfound responsibility. The journey of guiding others only echoed her own need for growth. With each revelation shared, she sensed a pivotal moment arising. Would she delve deeper into this new role, risking her vulnerabilities while cultivating trust in her capabilities? As she listened intently to their stories, the idea of leadership began to shape itself in her mind. In the intimacy of that room, she understood that art was only the beginning, a doorway to unraveling connections that could inspire transformative change in herself and others. The question loomed large. Could she honor her growing role as a mentor while still nurturing her own artist within? Why was it so difficult to balance her identity as both artist and leader? Each decision felt like a brushstroke on a well-worn canvas, and the implications of those strokes threatened to obscure her original vision. As she prepared to draw upon these reflections, Sarah felt her heart race. With every story shared, the question became more pointed. Was she ready to embrace the next chapter of this journey, even if it meant unraveling parts of herself she thought long settled? The workshop lingered in her mind like a vibrant afterglow that dimmed with the night. As she cleaned up the remnants of the creative chaos, paint tubes, brushes splayed like forgotten thoughts, and the lingering aroma of turpentine, Sarah felt a magnetic pull toward her next task. The participants had poured their hearts out, and in turn, it had unearthed a necessity within her to further explore the role of leadership in her artistic journey. Days passed, yet the sense of connection remained stridently alive. Drawing from the workshop experience, Sarah started a new canvas. This time, instead of seeking beauty, she searched for raw honesty. She found herself back in that familiar trance, each stroke attempting to encapsulate the vulnerability birthed from both her revelations and her students' struggles. But underlying that inspiration was a creeping corrosion of doubt. What if her art failed to resonate on any level? What if her newly claimed leadership role revealed her limitations? The paradox clung to her like an unwanted shadow. As she worked, colors clashed and harmonized, reflecting her internal conflict. She navigated the trepidation with the knowledge of her previous triumphs, gleaning strength from the workshop participants who had trusted her. Could she fasten this newfound insight into her artistry? Intent on deepening her engagement, she turned to a local community center, seeking permission to hold another workshop. This time, she aimed to craft a narrative arc fostering not only self-expression, but also exploration of the themes of resilience and growth. With each proposal draft she scribbled, a sense of purpose began to replace her skepticism. If she had guided others in expressing their truths, surely she could advocate for her own exploration of vulnerability. As she drove through town one Friday evening, an unexpected impulse compelled her to park in front of a gallery that had once displayed her work. Stepping inside, she marveled at the pieces hanging on the walls, each one a fragment of herself, her story captured in pigments. Yet, a gnawing sense loomed. Those pieces felt distant, as if they belonged not to her but to a version of herself that was long gone. She craved to evolve. Her artistic identity demanded transformation. Sarah's gaze landed on a new exhibition titled Reflections of Self. Each artist highlighted their journey toward self-acceptance. The intense emotions displayed ignited something within her. Browsing the exhibits illuminated concepts she had yet to embrace. Imperfections could be celebrated. Struggles could be painted as beautifully as any landscape. That evening, she returned home buoyed by a fresh perspective. It dawned on her that perhaps sharing the struggle was just as potent as sharing accomplishment. Accepting the ebb and flow of growth was a powerful act. She grabbed her journal and wrote fervently, script blurring from her pouring emotions. "Am I ready to embrace the artist I want to be?" she scribbled. "Can the world view me whole flaws and all?" As days drifted into a week, plans solidified for the workshop. She realized that she didn't need to hide behind polished narratives, but instead could use her continuous evolution as a vibrant testament to progress. With each realization, she released fears that had wound tightly around her like a vine. But as Sarah prepared her materials for the upcoming session, a lingering trepidation clouded her mind. With growth came responsibility, and she felt the weight of her next guiding step. How could she ensure that her own life experiences could serve her participants? Would sharing her growing pains undermine her leadership, or would it reinforce authenticity? Her heart raced at the prospect of unveiling her unfiltered journey. The stakes were higher now. Her fears had amassed into an insistent tide threatening to wash away all she had constructed. As she closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, a solitary thought writhed within her consciousness. It was time to confront not just the fears of her students, but her own. The moment was approaching when sharing her truth could mirror the raw beauty she sought in her art. A feeling more electric than before surged through her. Was she ready to expose her unrefined self to others? Would revealing her imperfections become the bridge between her dual identities? The workshop loomed ahead, and with it, a revelation awaited. Would she muster the courage to embrace the unfinished parts of herself in the light of others? Only time would reveal what lay at the end of this creative exploration. With the workshop merely days away, anticipation tightened in Sarah's chest like a knot that refused to loosen. Each evening, she meticulously laid out her supplies, arranging paints and brushes with the same care one might afford to battle gear. Her focus shifted between her art and the daunting prospect of bearing her vulnerabilities in front of others. The prospect of swimming in emotional depths both thrilled and terrified her. Beyond the physical preparations, Sarah wrestled with the decision to share her journey openly. Would it be perceived as self-indulgent? Was it right to display her struggles alongside their fledgling expressions? These questions bounced relentlessly in her mind, chipping away at her resolve. In quiet moments, the haunting voices of doubt echoed louder. Then, in a rare burst of clarity, Sarah opened her journal. She poured her fears onto the page, as if each word would drip from her mind and clear the residue of hesitation. "The fear of being exposed is greater than the fear of failure," she scribbled. "Can my vulnerability truly empower others?" As she penned those lines, she realized her potential impact. Honesty about her own path could illuminate her students' journeys. The thought thrilled her. This could elevate her role not just as an instructor, but as a guide leading with authenticity through shared human experience. The workshop day dawned with a mix of anxiety and exhilaration. Sarah wore a simple outfit, intending to blend in yet project confidence. As participants arrived, Their uncertain faces reminded her of her own earlier days of artistic exploration. Tension hung palpably in the air, suffused with both excitement and a hint of trepidation. Each newcomer came with personal stories, and Sarah felt a collective heaviness yet buoyancy emerge. No one was alone. After introductions, she stood before them, heart pounding against her ribcage. Art is as much about exploring our fears and imperfections as it is about celebrating our triumphs. She began, her voice steady despite the movement inside her. Today we'll not only create but also unearth the parts of ourselves that we often shy away from. Sarah noticed some participants' expressions shift from skepticism to curiosity, a flicker igniting within them. Infusing the workshop with an honest dialogue about vulnerability, she shared her own struggles, moments where her art had felt inadequate, times she grappled with self-doubt, and how each episode had shaped her. Each word wove threads of connection, binding them in an unfiltered space. As they began their exercises, laughter erupted amid hesitant strokes. Raw emotions burst from canvases more vibrant than she anticipated. The liberation of shared vulnerability hung in the air, painting the studio with authenticity. With each passing hour, the tide began to turn. As Sarah moved among the participants, she watched them embrace their truth, their flaws now beautiful facets of their artistic expression. Mirrored reflections caught her gaze. Their art was a tribute to shared rawness, echoing her own experiences. Yet, even within this embrace of honesty, a quiet whisper still nudged her. As they dipped deeper into their creative endeavors, a realization struck. Sharing vulnerabilities didn't just empower others, it complicated her leadership role further. What happens when the guide struggles to lead? How would her unresolved feelings influence her ability to inspire? That thought sent a shiver down her spine. The workshop encapsulated a pivotal moment, one where the lines between teacher and student blurred. As they uncovered profound emotions, shared risks, she too felt that deep connection. Would she manage to navigate through her own uncertainty as their guide? With each brushstroke, a fusion of fear and strength danced within her. This workshop had the potential to not only reveal personal breakthroughs for them, but also to challenge her own beliefs about her role. As she caught sight of a participant pouring their heart into their work, she knew they all stood on the precipice of discovery together, experiencing the raw pulse of creation. But tinges of doubt lingered. As the hour waned, would her guiding hand stumble when pressed to confront her own ongoing growth? Would the coming revelations allow her to emerge from this workshop not just as a mentor, but transformed? Something deeper beckoned as she reflected on her next moves. Would she step out of the shadows of her uncertainties, standing boldly alongside her participants? The true question lingered in the air as the final hour approached. When would she have to summon the courage to confront her deepest fears while standing in the light of others, now also revealed? With transformation on the horizon, Sarah had no choice but to embrace the unexpected journey before her. Would she discover the impact of her own resolution in this shared unfolding? As the final moments of the workshop unfolded, Sarah's heart raced, an intoxicating blend of fear and exhilaration coursing through her veins. She glanced around the room, absorbing the vibrant energy rising from each canvas, now alive with color and emotion. The once sterile studio gleamed with the chaos of creativity, the air thick with possibilities, the walls adorned with splashes of raw honesty. Yet, amid this flourishing landscape, a tide of uncertainty crashed against her composure. "Okay, everyone," she called out, her voice amplified by the crackle of anticipation. "Let us take a moment to share what your artwork means to you." But the question felt heavy, loaded with the weight of her own internal struggle. Could she draw them out while feeling so vulnerable herself? The answer eluded her. One by one, participants slowly articulated their thoughts, revealing fragments of their history through their brushes, stories of childhood dreams, stifled ambitions, and confrontations with their inner critics. Each revelation ignited bursts of connection within the group, the vulnerability shared born from an unspoken understanding of the power of creation. But with every story, Sarah felt her own confessions becoming an insistent whisper, begging for a voice. Yet, The thought of exposing her deeper fears flickered like a dim flame, apprehensive against the gusts of their newfound strength. Questions plagued her. Were her struggles relevant? Would her honesty dilute their experiences? Or could it elevate them? The weight of the unshared loomed large, taunting her just as her own brush hovered uncertainly over the canvas of her thoughts. "Sarah, do you want to share your piece?" A voice pierced her contemplation, pulling her back to the present. The participant's hopeful gaze beckoned her, yet Sarah was momentarily paralyzed. She nodded, swallowed hard, and forced her feet forward, moving closer to the radiant light flooding the room. As an artist, she began, the texture of her voice trembling slightly. "I often grapple with the shadow of comparison, this nagging belief that my art is lacking, that I'm somehow unworthy of this space we've created." The silence deepened, sticky with concentration. "What I painted reflects that struggle. It's a jumble of color and form, a manifestation of chaos, but amidst that, there is beauty, a reminder that imperfection holds its own power." A silence lingered, thick with acknowledgement. She sensed the room swell with shared recognition, as if each person could relate directly to the nagging doubts that plagued her. A ripple of realization surged within her. They were all on this journey together, their fears, struggles, and triumphs intertwined like the strands of a tapestry. Stepping further into the light of their collective vulnerability, Sarah recalled the words she had penned in her journal, an echo of her initial fears. "Can my vulnerability truly empower others?" she questioned, yet the answer surged within her like floodwaters releasing. Yes, it could. In their honest exchanges, she felt the stirrings of her own strength, nudged closer to resilience by the connections forming around her. As they closed the workshop, Sarah reflected on how she had facilitated a journey that was equally hers. She was no longer just a guide. She was a participant in a transformative dialogue, one that was pushing her to confront her own vulnerabilities head-on. The workshop had illuminated her capacity to grow alongside her students. Yet, a scratching unease lay just beneath the surface. Even in this space of connection, shadows of her self-doubt lingered, whispering reminders of how far she had yet to go. Would this new understanding sustain her as challenges emerged? Would the lessons of vulnerability manifest into her other endeavors beyond the studio walls? As participants drifted away, a sudden realization struck her, igniting a sense of urgency. She hadn't yet ventured into the depths of her personal artistry, the very essence of creation that had once driven her to paint. It was time to explore that uncharted territory while standing firmly in her truth. Gripping her brushes, Sarah felt the pull of an unknown future, shimmering just on the horizon. There were still unanswered questions swirling like the paint on her palette. What awaited her in this exploration? And how far could her journey of self-discovery reach? With each stroke upon her canvas, she was destined to find out an adventure alive with promise awaited. But would she have the courage to plunge into the unknown and embrace her artistry fully, once and for all? Sarah stood alone in the studio as the last participant stepped out. The vibrant canvases around her still pulsed with life, remnants of stories painted in spontaneous hues. Yet, the noise of the workshop faded away, leaving an echo of her own thoughts in its wake. She closed her eyes, focusing on her breath, grounding herself in an unfamiliar tranquility. This moment felt different. She had shared her truth, and now a gentle current of courage surged through her, urging her to explore deeper. The fear of inadequacy loomed like a dark cloud, but it no longer felt insurmountable. Instead, it stirred within her a fierce determination. What if confronting her fears could ignite something more profound, not just for herself, but also for the others who had opened their hearts? The idea ignited a spark of inspiration, pushing her forward to confront her next challenge. Brushing aside doubts, Sarah turned to her canvas, hoping to dive wholeheartedly into her artistry. Grabbing her palette, she poured color with abandon, reflecting the turmoil simmering beneath the surface. Yet, something stopped her anew. That chaotic swirl, was that truly the direction she wanted to take? The impulsiveness felt exhilarating, but as the colors mixed, she hesitated. She remembered the significance of her previous workshop, where the power of vulnerability was the cornerstone. Maybe her next piece needed to embody that same spirit. She paused and considered her emotions. They were allies, not enemies. What stories lay there that still needed expression? The last workshop had become a catalyst, but now it demanded something different. This was not merely about presenting a finished product to an audience. This was about raw expression and finding her voice amidst the uncertainty. As she contemplated her next strokes, Sarah reflected on the significance of time. How many pieces of her life remained dormant because she had rushed? As an artist, time was an unwelcome adversary. She questioned, could patience be her hidden ally? What if she let the creativity unfurl slowly, allowing its natural progression instead of squeezing it into a hasty resolution? The room dimmed in the growing dusk, and the soft glow of the overhead lights only intensified the palette's vibrancy. With each brushstroke, she let the moment teach her. She shied away from demanding perfection, leaning into mistakes as integral parts of her expression. In a way, this exploration mirrored her tumultuous journey through self-doubt, reminding her that beauty often resided in imperfection. Hours passed, and with each stroke, Sarah leaned further into discovery. The process of creation began transcendence. It wasn't just about a finished painting, but instead a testament to her personal growth. This time she dared to leave moments untouched, reveling in the balance of aggression and restraint. She allowed herself to enjoy the rhythm of the brush, her heart sinking with each movement on the canvas. Yet as the details emerged, she couldn't ignore the underlying thread of vulnerability threading its way through her piece. Would embracing this feeling translate into something powerful enough to share? To elevate? She felt vulnerable again, but this time it wasn't stifling. It was liberating. As the night wore on, she stood back, breathing in the newly formed canvas a reflection of her evolving self. The sooner she accepted that vulnerability held strength, the more she could offer to others. But as she surveyed the transformative work, a troubling question pierced her elation. Would anyone fully embrace this insight? At the next workshop, would her newfound understanding resonate with others as it had with her? A chill ran down her spine, reminding her of unfinished business. She had delved into her own struggles, but the looming thought of potentially sharing this piece ripped at the seams of her confidence. Who would she be if she accepted the challenge of showing her truth? The idea both thrilled and terrified her. What awaited her in this confrontation of her own insecurities? With a deep breath, she approached the canvas again, eager to confront her next set of challenges and the drama that could unfold. The moment of truth approached, and Sarah was on the threshold of discovery, ready to create, yet again. The soft light of dawn crept through the tall windows, casting a gentle glow across the studio, awakening the remnants of Sarah's creative night. A blanket of calm settled over her as she contemplated the piece she had just poured herself into. But serenity quickly gave way to the familiar weight of uncertainty. The canvas stood before her, a vivid reflection not just of her artistic expression, but a visual memoir of her vulnerabilities and victories. With a tentative touch, she traced her fingers along the dried paint, each texture morphing her memories into palpable sensations. This was more than just paint. It was a testament to her metamorphosis. Yet, the shadow of doubt lurked behind the bright colors, whispering what-ifs that clawed at her resolve. What if she failed to convey the profundity of her emotions when sharing this with others? The thought nipped at her confidence. She sat back, arms resting on her knees, as her mind swirled with questions. Her previous workshop had offered her insight, but now it felt insufficient. Sharing her truth involved a vulnerability that sparked fear deep within. But what if this sharing could inspire someone else? She pondered the potential impact. Was she ready to embrace the discomfort that came with opening herself to judgment? What if this fear was the very hurdle she needed to leap over for growth? Determined, Sarah pulled out her journal, its pages filled with notes, sketches, and reflections. She flipped through until she landed on a passage that struck her. Art is an ongoing conversation. If I fade into silence, I miss the chance to be part of that dialogue. The weight of those words anchored her, urging her to respond. She realized the connection between her own journey and the paths of others who sat beneath the same sun, feeling isolated yet longing for resonance. But this confrontation of her insecurities posed an imminent challenge. What story behind the canvas would she bring to life? Was she prepared to dig deeper? The idea of baring her soul felt daunting, yet in that danger lurked the potential for transformation. She decided to utilize the hues on her palette to embark on a new project, a series that would depict her personal confrontations with vulnerability. Each painting would showcase a different aspect of her journey, revealing her internal battles and embracing the bittersweet nature of growth. Yet, each choice called for a pause, a decision where the grave stakes of honesty lay. Would she dare to capture the rawness of fear? As she deliberated, she felt a familiar tug of urgency, a channeling of her energy into each stroke, each color selection. It was a reminder of the lessons learned about patience. The previous night had shown her the beauty in leaving space for contemplation and evolution, rather than rushing towards a conclusion. Would the audience embrace this journey with her, even in its messy intricacies? With a decisive heart, she picked up her brush. Every stroke presented itself as both a challenge and an answer, a mosaic of courage bridging her past and her future. The colors danced anew, learning from her hesitancies, her boldness weaving stories yet untold. But even as she lost herself in creation, an inkling of fear began to surface again. Would her authenticity resonate, or would it falter amidst the scrutiny of others? The thought rang like a knell, echoing loudly through the serenity she sought to cultivate. The tendency to lean toward perfection lurked nearby like an unwelcome companion. As she stepped back to assess her progress, she found herself questioning the direction of her work. Did it fulfill its purpose of connection and depth? Would she have the strength to present this when the time came? Restlessness began to flutter in her stomach at the thought of sharing her explorative journey. Yet another realization broke through her doubts. Perhaps it wasn't solely about the acceptance of others, but about embracing her truth regardless of outcome. Resolved, Sarah concluded that her next challenge awaited just beyond her studio door. The need for vulnerability was one she must confront beyond the confines of her comfort zone. Could she unveil her layers and share this evolving tapestry of existence with those who sought connection? With newfound clarity, she prepared for the inevitable crossroads ahead. A new confrontation lay in wait, harnessing both excitement and trepidation blended into one potent force. What awaited her at the next workshop? Would she embrace the risk of sharing her truth? As the brush fell from her fingers, the moment of truth unfurled on the horizon, thrilling her to her core. As Sarah stood in her studio, the scent of paint lingering in the air, she finally grasped the enormity of her transformation. Gone were the days of questioning her worth solely through the lens of societal expectations. Instead, she was on the brink of revealing a deeper truth, the vibrancy of her authentic self, intertwined with her artistic journey. Each canvas she had created became a milestone marking her evolution. Yet one crucial question remained. How would she share her newfound identity with the world? The day of the imminent workshop arrived, pulsating with an electric energy that coursed through her veins. Sarah's heart raced not from fear, but from a burgeoning excitement tied to the prospect of vulnerability. She gathered her materials, her new series of paintings, each a raw representation of the battles fought within. The realization anchored her. Sharing her process was not a liability, but a gift. The insights gleaned from her artistic path could resonate with others, ignite their struggles into inspiration, and carve out a community built on shared experiences. As the participants began to trickle in, Sarah greeted them with a newfound warmth and confidence. No longer mistaking her past experiences for weaknesses, she embraced them as signposts marking her journey. The room soon buzzed with chatter, the air thick with anticipation. Just like the colors on her canvas, the energy in the room coalesced into a palpable encouragement. Today, Sarah announced, her voice steady and clear, we'll embark on a journey of exploration together. I'll share my own story, my vulnerabilities, and encourage you to do the same. With every heartbeat, she felt the weight of doubt lessen as her purpose solidified. The opening of her experience was a portal inviting others into their journeys of self-discovery. As she unveiled her paintings, a silence washed over the room, absorbing her audience. Each piece had transformed her pain into beauty, reflecting intricate textures of struggle and resilience. She spoke openly about her fears and ambitions, painting a vivid picture of the creative process, one filled not with polished perfection, but with the fervor of vulnerability. The participants leaned in, captivated by the sincerity woven into her narrative. With genuine vulnerability as her beacon, stories began to pour forth from the workshop attendees, sharing their own struggles and aspirations as the evening unfolded. Laughter intertwined with tears, a symphony of emotional authenticity coming to the fore. That night, Sarah witnessed the fireworks of connection igniting, a testament to the power of embracing one's true self. After the workshop concluded, Sarah reflected on the echoes of the evening. Each moment sickened her with challenges, yet it danced with elation. She had not just guided others through their journeys, but had been transformed by theirs as well. In the shared vulnerability, she discovered solace, a mutual understanding that celebrated the beauty of imperfection. The following weeks coalesced into a web of new opportunities. Inspired by the trust established during the workshop, Sarah received invitations to showcase her work in local galleries and art markets, each opportunity igniting her passion further. The connections she fostered led to collaborations with fellow artists and mentors, enhancing her growth while cementing her place in the artistic community. On one particular afternoon, Sarah stood in a bustling gallery showcasing her new series. The walls reverberated with whispers of admiration and forecasted meanings of her artistic expressions. The very act of embracing her vulnerabilities, of stepping into the spotlight, had transformed not only her art but her life. In that moment she stood tall, her confidence solidified. Looking around, she realized she had built a community of artists and dreamers, willing to face their personal storms. Their experiences, once cloaked in uncertainty, had artfully intertwined with hers. Sarah felt a sense of fulfillment swell within her, a satisfaction not found in mere recognition but in the power of achieving the very thing she thought was unattainable. A space to be wholly herself. In the midst of it all, her artistic evolution, the camaraderie cultivated, and the blossoming opportunities, the most significant chapter unfolded. Sarah's acceptance of her journey as a valid and unending exploration. She realized that every brushstroke, every conversation, and each courageous interaction had delivered her to a newfound self-awareness. Now, as she ventured forth, Sarah knew that her art was so much more than color on canvas. It embodied her voice, her story, and her right to embrace imperfection. With renewed vigor, she committed to her practice, empowering her own journey, while igniting a fire in others to pursue their creativity, flaws and all. This was not the end, but an exhilarating beginning. It was the moment of her true achievement, embracing herself fully, creating with unfiltered honesty, and transforming personal vulnerability into an everlasting dialogue with the world. Sarah concluded her inner reflection with a triumphant sense of purpose. She had conquered the challenge of her fears, strengthened her craft, and forged connections that would last a lifetime. She understood now that her journey was an art in itself, a masterpiece of resilience, patience, and the entirely messy beauty of living. The future was now hers to embrace. The canvas stretched wide open, waiting for each fresh stroke and daring possibility. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.